For my project, I decided to look into the Great British tradition, more specifically tea and cake. Before deciding on this theme, I looked into different areas of Great Britain, such as the royal family, prince, fashion in the 50s most specifically, and wartime. I gained most inspiration for our love of tea, so this is how I decided on my theme. Before creating my dress, I also found this image in a magazine where it's a double-layered dress. I really liked this image and decided quite early on that I also wanted to do a double-layered dress. I also really liked the images I found in a book when researching in the library. These images are of 1950s women. As you can see in one of these images, there's a lady and a young girl wearing the aprons. This inspired me also to create an apron on my dress. I decided to look further into my chosen theme. I researched tea and the origins of it to find out it was a medicinal drink used in China and didn't actually become popular in Britain until the late 18th century, after tax on tea was abolished due to tea smuggling in Britain. Tea itself is a motif I would like to use on my dress, either in the form of a teacup or teapot, as I feel this will strengthen the relevance to the dress to my theme. As well as tea, I wanted to use cake in my dress. The chosen motif at this point for me was the Victoria sponge, due to the cake being named after Queen Victoria during the war. For first-hand inspiration, I visited the Vintage Fair in Reading on May the 11th. This had a wide range of vintage clothing dating back from the 1920s to even modern-day clothing with vintage twists. I gained a lot of inspiration here, especially from the rockabilly section. Although not British, they had a lot of British themes on the dresses, in the patterns and in the styles. For further inspiration, I decided to look into 3 different designers: Dior, Galliano and Cath Kidston. I looked into Dior's 1950s new look, with this being relevant to the era I wanted to focus on, as well as the fit and flare dress being the main focus of this collection. I really wanted to gain inspiration from the length of the dresses by me introducing a 2-layer on my dress. This also felt relevant to Galliano's autumn collection, where he layered up the fit and flare dresses he created with many different types of material and layers. I looked into Cath Kidston because I really liked the pattern material she uses as well as her colour scheme. She is also inspired by Great British traditions and felt she would be a great inspiration to myself. I created several initial designs using fabric samples. For me, this felt like eliminating some of the fabric that I didn't feel would be as successful as others. My most successful was a teapot printed material, which I felt was relevant to both my theme, my era, as well as being relevant to one of my designers, Cath Kidston. For the back of my dress, I had to apply 13 different buttons. I researched buttons themselves as well as creating some, using ceramic, acrylic, copper, aluminium, tin and wood. The most successful out of them all I felt was the wood ones, as I could do this in the laser cutter, which meant they were all cut precisely to the same size, whereas in the ceramic workshop I found it hard to get a consistent size, width, shape and quality. Inspired by earlier images, I also wanted to create the apron, so I researched different types of aprons and different eras they belonged to. I found the hostess apron was most relevant to my era in the 1950s and also was the most simplistic to design. So from here on I designed a few initial ideas and also came up with a few fabric samples. From this I also created the final design idea where I'd screen print a cupcake onto the front of the double layered apron. With my chosen material I decided to create 3 final design ideas. One with a peplum, another one with a double layered skirt, as well as another one with a waistband. I felt my most successful was the double layer skirt one, for this being relevant to my 1950s era, as well as the pattern being simplistic and easy to make. With my final material chosen, I decided to do different samples, including yoke samples, dart samples, bias binding samples and buttonhole samples. With the dart and the yoke sample, I decided to do it in my final chosen material. The poly cotton was very easy to work with and manipulate, and I had great confidence in using it for my final dress. The buttonhole samples were fairly successful with their quality depending on how thick the material was. With the poly cotton being quite thin, I felt they would work very successfully on my dress itself. The bias binding samples were harder to work with, and I felt they didn't always come out as neat as I would have liked it to. This was also encouraged by my 12, which I did one armhole with shop-bought bias binding and the other one with homemade bias binding. The shop-bought bias binding came out a lot neater and the finish on it was a lot better, so from there on I decided to use shop-bought bias binding on my own dress. These are my design boards. For my dress I'll be using a plain pink polycotton for the underskirt as well as the yoke, and a printed teapot polycotton for the main dress part. There will be 13 to 15 buttons running down the back of the dress, all in wood, either hand painted or decorated with decoupage paper, relevant to my theme. The apron itself will be made of 2 layers, both of polycotton, and there will be a large waistband which will tie in a large bow around the back. This will also be made of polycotton. On the second layer will be a pocket in the form of a cupcake, and this will be made in puff medium, which comes away from the fabric. The apron will be hemmed with pink ribbon, as well as pink ribbon going around the cupcake itself. Overall, I'm very happy with my final garment, as it meets all my design requirements. The finish on my garment, in my opinion, is of a good quality and very neat. The buttons are my favourite part of the dress due to them being hand painted. I feel this adds a nice personal touch as well as increases interest to my dress. I'm happy with the apron, however I did have a few errors when making it. I had accidentally cut into the apron at one point, but I solved this by sewing it back up. My favourite feature of the apron has to be the cupcake print pocket, as the print came out really well and the pocket sits nicely against the apron. If I were to do this project again, however, I would take more care when cutting out my pattern pieces to prevent mistakes when sewing pieces together.